Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving deep into the National Education Policy 2020. Now, if you're preparing for exams like UPSC, UPS, or BPS, you know this is an absolutely critical topic. And really, it's more than just a policy document, right? It's a vision, a roadmap for what India could look like by 2047. So, let's get into it.
All right, to get our brains warmed up and into that exam mode, let's kick things off with a question from a previous year's paper. It's a great way to see why understanding the history of these policies is so crucial for grasping the new one. So, take a look at the question and the options. What do you think?
And the correct answer is B, the 1986 National Policy on Education. So Operation Blackboard was all about getting basic, essential facilities into primary schools across the country. And knowing this really sets the stage for our discussion today, doesn't it? It shows us the kinds of problems we were trying to solve back then, and why, decades later, we needed a completely new approach for the challenges of the 21st century.
So, here's our game plan for today. We're going to break down the National Education Policy 2020 into 6 main parts. We'll start with the policy in perspective, then move to school education, higher education, the pillars of the policy, implementation challenges, and finally, we'll wrap up with a focus on mains answer writing. By the end, you'll have everything you need.
Okay, let's jump into our first section, Policy in Perspective. We're going to talk about the shift from what was basically an assembly line model of learning to something much more holistic. This isn't just a simple update, it's a total rethink of what education should be. So this timeline really puts things in perspective. You can see the major milestones, 1968, 1986, a small modification in 92, and then 2020. That's a 34-year gap. This is the first massive overhaul in over 3 decades. And it was chaired by the brilliant space scientist Dr. K. Kasturigan. But you know what's really amazing? This policy was created after the largest consultation process of its kind ever in India. I mean, they took suggestions from everyone, right from the Gram Panchayat level all the way up. That's a huge deal. And this is the heart of the change, right here. The old system, well, it was kind of a product of the industrial age. Think of it like an assembly line. Heavy on memorization, stuffing content into kids, and forcing them into rigid streams. You're either science, commerce, or arts. The NEP 2020 completely flips that script. The new vision is all about recognizing that every single child has unique potential. It's about holistic development, cognitive, emotional, social, the whole package. So how does this grand vision actually translate to what happens in our schools? Let's dive into that. We're about to look at probably one of the most talked about changes, the complete restructuring of school education away from that old 10+2 system we all grew up with. Okay, so here it is. The old 10+2 structure is out, and the new 5+3+3+4 is in. And the really groundbreaking part of this? Look at that first number, the 5. It brings the crucial early childhood years from age 3 to 6 formally into the education system for the very first time. And there's a huge scientific reason for this. We now know that over 85% of a child's brain develops by age 6. So getting these foundational years right is absolutely non-negotiable for everything that comes after. Let's break down these 4 new stages, because each one is specifically tailored to how kids learn at that age. First up is the foundational stage. That's ages 3 to 8. Think play, activities, discovery. No stressful exams. It's all about building a love for learning and getting the basics of literacy and numeracy down. Then comes the preparatory stage, from 8 to 11. Here we start to gently introduce subjects, but the focus is still very much on interactive, discovery-based learning. After that, we hit the middle stage, ages 11 to 14. This is where students start tackling more abstract concepts and, this is super important, get introduced to vocational skills like coding. And finally, the secondary stage, for ages 14 to 18, is all about flexibility. It's multidisciplinary, with no hard separation of streams, giving students a real choice in what they want to learn. Now, this right here, Foundational Literacy and Numeracy, or FLN, is an absolute cornerstone of the entire policy. The thinking is simple but powerful. If a child can't read with understanding or do basic math by the end of grade 3, they're going to fall behind in every other subject. It creates a massive learning gap that's almost impossible to close later. That's why the policy calls it an urgent and necessary prerequisite. And to tackle this head-on, the government launched the Nipun Bar Admission. That stands for the National Initiative for Proficiency in Reading with Understanding and Numeracy, and its goal is to make sure every child has these foundational skills by 2026-27. And here's another game changer, especially for the secondary stage. You know that rigid separation we all had? You're either a science student, a commerce student, or an art student? Well, that's gone. Now a student can literally pick and choose a mix of subjects. You want to study physics with fashion design? Go for it. This is all about letting students follow their true interests and passions. And board exams? They're also getting a makeover. The idea is to make them lower stakes and actually test core concepts and skills, not just how well you can memorize things for a single test.
Okay, we've talked about schools, now let's shift gears to higher education, because the changes here are just as radical. The whole aim is to build a system that's more flexible, more focused on the student, and that finally breaks down those artificial walls between different subjects.
And one of the biggest, most ambitious targets of this policy is this: to hit a 50% gross enrollment ratio in higher education by the year 2035. So what does that mean? It basically means we want half of our young people in the college-going age group to actually be enrolled in higher education. To put that in perspective, we're currently at about 27%. So the goal is to nearly double it. That's a huge leap.
Now this, the 4-year multidisciplinary undergraduate program with multiple entry and exit points, is a complete game changer. Think about it. In the old system, if you had to drop out after a year or two because of, say, financial problems, you were left with nothing. All that time and effort, gone. But now, your learning is valued at every step. Finish 1 year, you get a certificate. 2 years, you get a diploma. 3 years, a bachelor's degree. And if you stick around for a 4th year, you get a bachelor's with research, which can be a direct pathway to a PhD. It's incredibly empowering for students.
So you might be wondering, how on earth is all this flexibility going to work? The answer is something called the Academic Bank of Credit, or ABC. The best way to think about it is like a digital bank account, but for your academic credits instead of money. For every course you pass, credits get deposited into your account. Then, if you need to take a break, or even switch universities, you can just withdraw those credits and apply them to your degree later on. It's the technology that makes this whole flexible, lifelong learning vision a reality.
Now, any grand plan like this needs a solid foundation to stand on, right? So let's talk about the pillars that hold up this entire new structure. We're going to look at teachers, language, and inclusion.
You can see here that the policy is really built on 4 interconnected pillars. At the heart of it all is teacher education, because let's be honest, a system is only as good as its teachers. Backing that up is a thoughtful language policy, a really strong focus on inclusion and equity, for instance, through things like gender inclusion funds, and of course, the smart use of technology to support learning. They all have to work together.
The policy is crystal clear on this. Teachers are at the center of this transformation. And to raise the bar, by 2030, the new minimum qualification to become a teacher will be a 4-year integrated Bachelor of Education, or BEd, degree. This isn't just an add-on degree. It's a comprehensive program that weaves together deep subject knowledge and the actual art and science of teaching. The goal is to make sure our teachers are absolute professionals, ready to go from day one.
Now, the language policy. This is often called a game changer. And for good reason. There is overwhelming global research that shows kids learn concepts, especially complex ones, way faster and better when they're taught in their mother tongue or home language in the early years. So the policy strongly recommends this up to at least grade 5 and preferably even till grade 8. It also talks about a flexible 3-language formula, and, this is key, it makes it very clear that no language will be imposed on any state. Okay, so we've talked about this incredible vision, but a vision on paper is one thing. Making it happen on the ground is another. A policy is only as good as its implementation, right? So let's get real and look at the road ahead, the progress that's been made, and the very significant challenges that still lie in wait. You can't have a revolution without resources, and funding is absolutely critical. The NEP 2020 calls for public investment in education to reach 6% of our gross domestic product. Now, this isn't a new number. It was actually first recommended way back in 1968 by the Qatari Commission. But we're still only at about 3%. Hitting this 6% target is essential. It's about shifting our mindset to see education not as an expense, but as the single most important investment we can make in our future. So, let's take stock. Where are we right now? Well, there's definitely been progress. The Nipun Bharat mission is up and running. The Academic Bank of Credit has been established. The 4-year BEd programs have started. That's the good news. But the biggest hurdle, the one that's hardest to measure, is changing the mindset. We live in a society that is obsessed with exams and marks. Shifting that deep-rooted culture among parents, teachers, the whole system, from being exam-driven to being learning-driven, well, that's not going to happen overnight. It's a huge challenge.
All right, let's bring it all together, especially for those of you preparing for your mains. We're going to distill everything we've talked about into the key takeaways and keywords. Sprinkling these specific terms into your answers is how you show the examiner you've done your homework and really understand the nuts and bolts of the policy. Make sure you have these terms in your notes. When you're writing about school education, you absolutely have to mention the 5+3+3+4 structure and foundational literacy and numeracy, or FLN. When the question is on higher education, the magic phrases are multiple entry and exit system and academic bank of credit. And to describe the overall vision, you'll want to use terms like holistic and multidisciplinary education and competency-based assessment. Using this precise language makes your answers stand out.
So, to put all this knowledge to the test, here's a practice question for your mains. The key word here is critically analyze. That means you need a balanced answer. You'll want to start by explaining the key provisions, all the great things we've talked about. But then you have to dive into the challenges, the funding, the teacher capacity, and that big one, the mindset shift. Everything we've covered today should give you the perfect framework for a stellar answer.
See you again tomorrow with an important editorial. For this, subscribe to the YouTube channel Unlock UPSC. Thank you.